This is Chapter 1, Observing and Documenting the Crime Scene. So what should be done at the crime scene? Now we are on Step 2. We went over Secure the Crime Scene in the previous video. Now this time we are going to look at observing and documenting the crime scene. So for your initial observations and documentation, the first responder, the first people that come, either they're police officers or medics, should document the following. This after they have helped any injured people. The state of the scene when they arrive, like the location, the condition, and the appearance of people and objects. Existing conditions when arrival. So were the lights on? Was the window open? Was the door open? Was there broken glass through a broken window? Things like that. And all personal information concerning witnesses, victims, and suspects, which can be so it would be like names and addresses and contact information. And then actions and statements of witnesses, victims, or suspects, and all other personnel who have entered or exited the scene. You need to know who has gone in, who has gone out of the scene, because if they leave any evidence behind, you need to be able to rule them out as suspects because you know that they're in there. Any items that may have moved or who moved them. Moved items should not be put back into their original spot. So let's say the first officer or the medic comes in and they're helping an injured person, but they have to move the lamp or something out of the way. They need to document that, but they do not put it back to where it was. The crime scene should be documented exactly as they are found. And if there are any modifications that someone did, they need to be documented. So documentation at the crime scene is important and time-consuming, but it's legally critical and sheds light on how evidence relates to the overall scene. Documentation is one of the biggest things that in a criminal investigation, and it can be the reason why courts can rule out a case, to throw it out, because documentation was not properly given or recorded. The chain of custody for evidence is legally critical because it provides nothing was altered prior to analysis of evidence. The chain of custody, we'll go over it in a little bit more detail later, but it's basically a paper trail of who has touched or handled the evidence from the moment that was found at the crime scene to the moment it goes to court and during the trial as well. So there are 4 main ways that you observe and document: note-taking, photography, sketching, and videography. So for note-taking, again, it begins with the first responder, when they arrived and the address where they arrived, what the scene looked like, name and addresses of people present. Note-taking is the core of the crime scene. Like I said before, notes are can be the biggest help for the whole crime investigation. So they need to be very detailed. Detailed notes help the lawyers and investigators way more than brief comments. If it's not detailed or there are eraser marks and misspellings, then they can be used to try to discredit the investigator during trial. Especially eraser marks. You wouldn't erase anything in a notebook. If you did it wrong, you would cross it out with one line and put your initials by it so that people know that you're the one that marked it. And they can still see what you had written. Audio recording can be used to supplement written notes, but not a substitution. Sometimes it's easy to record yourself talking, but you still need to have the notes as well. And then the collection, packaging, and labeling of evidence must all be described in your notes as well. So the main parts of the notes, when you log them in, you put the date, the time, the location, the weather, environmental conditions, description of crime, location of evidence, names of people, any modifications, conditions of evidence, There you go, you can see it better. And time of its discovery. Those are all essential when you take your notes. So photography, move me back down. Take a systematic series of photos at different shot angles, which include 3 different shots. Overall shots, which are taken to show where the crime occurred, the surrounding areas, the entrance and exit of the crime scene. So if the crime scene was inside, you would use the room corners as guides to take overlapping shots of the whole crime scene, and you can piece them together later. You record the doors and the windows, again, how you found them, if the windows were open, if the doors were closed, things like that. Usually you attach a camera to a tripod so that the slower shutter speed can be used when you take these overall pictures. If it's outside, you make sure you get images of the structures around, the roads, paths, addresses, and signs around the crime scene. The next set of photos are mid-range shots, which you record a sequential series of photos that highlight the physical evidence and its relationship to the crime scene. So you would take a photo of the knife next to the body for mid-range shots. For close-up shots, taken to record detail and appearance of each piece of evidence. So in this case, you would have a close-up shot of just the knife. So the mid-range would be the knife next to the body in relation to where it is in the crime scene, and the close-up shots would be the actual knife with and without rulers next to it for measurement. Record using side lighting and documentation placards at first, and then take shots with and without the scale. Photography, each photo taken at a crime scene must be recorded in a photo log. Again, this is very important for documenting. You need to document everything you do. So this log should record the date and time, the camera settings, like if there's the shutter speed of it, the file name and number of each shot, and the exposure number, which type of shot it was, overall, mid-range, or close-up, distance to the object, where the camera was away from the object, brief description of subject matter. So what pictures would you take if you went to a crime scene where the body was found indoors with a knife and blood next to them? For overall shots, you do all the walls, ceilings, floors, doors, windows, adjacent rooms, and these would all be overlapping shots so that you can piece them all together to get a complete sense of the crime scene. Mid-range shots, the body and its relationship to the crime scene and doors, walls, etc. Like I said before, maybe the body next to knife. Close-up shots would be the knife and the bloodstain with and without a ruler for scale, and the knife and bloodstain with evidence number place cards next to it. So those yellow place cards you see that have 1, 2, 3, those would be the evidence number place cards. So there are a lot of pictures in this slide. Basically, so this is the series of photographs someone has taken for a car that was a crime scene. And you can see how thorough they are. They have 17 pictures here, which are even more than, they're probably more than what they took, or they took more than what they wrote down. But you can see how it does the front, the side, the back, the other side, there's different photos for every single angle that they can get, and they can piece together the crime scene in the car. So sketching is the second one. The purpose of sketching is to accurately record distances between objects at the scene and to emphasize relevant objects. So after you take photos, the investigator should sketch the crime. Sketches are made to document perspective and distance, which would not be accurately reflected within the photographs. So you can take a picture of a body further away, but you don't know what's around, what structures are around where you took your photo. You don't have the exact distance from where you are standing to the body. So the first thing people do are the rough sketch. It's made at the crime scene. It's simple depiction of all the items of interest. It's not accurately drawn to scale, but it has all the information that someone would need to make the professional finished sketch. Oftentimes, a sketch will be a small part of an overall scene. Then there is usually a larger sketch, which acts as an atlas, showing the relative locations of the smaller, more detailed sketch. So if you detailed a whole floor of a house, like a main floor, the larger sketch would be that whole floor. Maybe where the body is would be one of the relative locations. The smaller, more detailed sketches might be one of those. So the finished sketch, you can see that it's done through a computer. It was produced from the information provided in the rough sketch. And you use a computer-aided design program, a CAD program. You can make sketches that zoom in on certain rooms and areas. So after you've made the computer-aided design, that allows you to be able to zoom in on certain rooms or areas to show the body, physical evidence, and other items of interest. And then these professional finished sketches are what they use for courtroom presentations. And they're usually drawn from an overhead view. So here you can see the difference between the rough sketch and the final sketch. The rough sketch is, again, it's quick, it's done at the crime scene, it's not to scale. And then you can see the final sketch that is to scale and a better idea of where the body is. Instead of a stick man, it's a more defined man on where the blood is. The sketches must include the case identifier, the date, time, and location, the weather and lighting conditions, name of the sketch, identity and assignments of personnel, dimensions and layout, measurements and positioning, key or legend, orientation, and scale. So there's a lot of things that have to go into this sketch, what you have to document for them. Again, documentation is the biggest thing. There are 3 different measurement techniques for sketching. There's 2 are from fixed points. So two things that can't move, like the corner of a room, a tree, or a utility pole. So triangulation, you have location of the evidence, which is X and Y, in relation to fixed points. So this would be your first fixed point, A, and your second fixed point, B. So this distance is what you would use for the evidence. Baseline is you draw a line between the fixed points, so this would be tree and utility pole, and then measure the distance to evidence, the X and the Y, just like there's evidence here, X and Y at right angles, so they are done at right angles. And then there's a polar coordinate sketching is most commonly used and very helpful and used in large area crime scenes, like outside or in a warehouse. So you have object X, which is evidence, distance from a wall, A, and 40 degrees northeast. So they would need a compass to measure the angle. And it's always from the north, so it's always in relationship to where it is north. So this is only one fixed object, the wall. It doesn't have 2. So videography. Videography should complement and not replace still photography. It's maybe the best way to document the overall scene of the crime because it shows the relationships of various pieces of evidence both to one another and to the scene. It's a lot clearer than piecing together the pictures. It's all there in a video. It's an easy and excellent, convenient way to document the investigation and evidence collection. You can show how people are collecting that evidence, and it can show that they're doing it properly or improperly. Forensic scientists who are not present at the crime scene find that the video allows them to understand the scene after the fact the best. Guidelines for video recording. You begin the video with a placard that contains the case number, date, time, and location, an overview of the area enclosing the crime scene, recording the crime scene from north, south, east, and west. Turn off the audio unless there is a narrator, but be careful. Anything recorded, even comments recorded from bystanders is admissible in court. So you just have to be careful with who's around you. Move the camera slowly and keep the scene in focus. If there isn't sunlight, use good video lighting. Avoid zooming in on anything. It should just be plain video. If you zoom in, it would give a different perspective that wasn't accurate along with everything else. And it should never be edited, as an original is kept as evidence and copies are made for distribution. If it's edited, it will be thrown out. You can also document the crime scene with a 3D laser. They used to create a detailed permanent recording of everything in the crime scene, and it helps investigators to re-examine details of crime scene long after the site is no longer a crime scene. Shows the relative positions of objects, but the objects are in rough 3D shape. This method is non-contact. Nothing in the scene is moved or affected when you're taking these laser beam shots. So what they do is they have a device that shoots a laser beam across at a target at multiple angles and recorded by a detector. So it can take millions of digital measurements, send it to a computer program, which records the information that the laser sent it, and then it makes a 3D model of the scene. Here you can see everything is flat, like the final sketch, and here you can see the 3D sketch, which helps you see a lot better perspective and what was going on instead of just an overview, two-dimensional. These things can take about 1,500 photos from each angle and creates a 3D map of the crime scene. So an overview, the four main observation and documentation techniques are note-taking, which is the description of the crime location and evidence, names of people, it's the core of the crime scene. Photography, it's an accurate record of the original crime scene, what and where the evidence is. Sketching, graphic documentation that shows the orientation, layout, and the relationship between location and evidence. Videography, easy way to document the overall view of the scene. But again, videography is not supplemental to photography, is supplemental to photography. It should not be the only thing used. So in summary, the initial observations and documentations are from the first responders. They say the state of the scene upon arrival, existing conditions, personal information of witnesses, victims, and suspects, action and statements of anyone who entered or exited the crime scene and witnesses, any item moved and who moved them. Documenting the crime scene is legally critical. It is the biggest thing to do. Note-taking is the core of the crime scene, and it needs to be very detailed. Photography, it's a systematic series of photos. So photos all taken